We are here with Miss Lauren Gunn. Lauren, I want to thank you for joining me today as we can discuss some of this NBA basketball stuff. Before we get started, I really want to just jump right into kind of who you are, what you've been
Mhm.
doing. It's been a few years since you and I have spoken.
Right,
Really spoken in general, but even spoken from a content perspective. So
for
I
sure.
just kind of want to let's give the audience a little bit of opportunity and a little bit of understanding of where you're what your background is, what you're doing, where you're at, and then we'll actually get into some of the content because I'm super excited to talk about it. So I'm gonna go ahead and give you the
All right, good deal. Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me. From a content perspective, I used to write for Mavs Moneyball. I did that for about a year. That was kind of when I first started the media credential, going to all the games, that sort of experience, which was super cool. And then my time at Mavs Moneyball kind of naturally came to an end. And then I was over with SDPN with Esperhini. We were doing some stuff over there for about roughly a year. And then some things kind of changed there. And so ever since then, I've been with Bleacher Report, where I'll go do live streams through their apps, kind of reacting to breaking news, looking at different trending topics, like somebody's on the trade market, 5 teams that they could 5 potential landing spots, stuff like that. So always kind of following what's going on in the NBA news cycle, because as you know, it's a 365-day a year league. So there's always something to talk about. And so that's kind of what I'm doing now between the Bleacher Report stuff. And also I did launch an independent project called The Trading Post. So kind of circled around the transaction cycles and kind of looking at the different things leading up to that. Obviously, everyone kind of knows who the players are, the big names that are out there, but also some of these more under the radar guys that kind of can slip through the cracks. Look at someone like Trey Mann, who was out of the rotation in OKC. Now he's in Charlotte, got kind of lumped into that Gordon Hayward deal, and he's kind of found himself a home, really thriving there. So my kind of focus is really looking at potential situations like that. Another guy I think is Obi Toppin is also a good example. Different situation, but another guy who kind of, you could see his time naturally coming to an end, and then all of a sudden, new location, new home, and he's thriving. So, and he gets paid too. So I try to look for situations like that, so fans of certain teams could be like, hey, my team could be the next one to get a guy that turns into a significant rotation player, even starter for us.
Yeah, that's a really interesting niche. I think that when it
Mhm.
comes to the content space, trying to determine where what lane you want to be in, it's starting to get to a point where everybody's got a podcast, everybody's got two.
Right. Right.
Everyone's trying to be whatever, and it's all just kind of flooding the space.
Hmm.
So getting into some, I don't know if I know anybody else who's doing that, like
Yeah.
what you're doing, which
Hmm.
is really cool, and hopefully you
Yeah.
can kind of parlay it into just stuff moving forward. But it's also a way to just kind of promote yourself. I think
Yeah.
you had a huge base with Mavs Moneyball.
For sure.
Um, and so now you can kind of take that and use that to kind of help build you've already got kind of an audience, we'll call it a fan base for lack of better words,
Sure.
that you can then use and take to help push what you've got moving forward. So I think that that's really dope personally.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think the transaction cycle is so interesting because part of what I focus on, I'm not going to sit here and put, use the trade machine to try and find the perfect trade, because there's so many variables. And half the time the trades that actually end up going through, a lot of people are overwhelmed by. And so for me, it's not about finding or predicting what the trade is going to be. It's really more so about identifying previous patterns of, okay, certain front offices have good relationships with this front office. They tend to kind of lean on each other, whether it be in salary dump situations. Like I think a good example of that is New York and Detroit, when they had to dump all of that money to get Jalen Brunson in, just sort of identifying patterns like that. Even Dallas with Charlotte, they made 2 deals with Charlotte in the last year, stuff like that, to kind of identify patterns and look at things that are maybe more likely than just an idea of something like, hey, Zach LaVine could work on the Lakers, but would that really happen? Maybe. I actually think it probably should have already happened, but I have heard some things that maybe lead me to believe will it ever happen. And so it's the stuff like that I try to kind of just cast light on, of like, here's point A, B, and C, why I think this could happen, but doesn't always mean it will.
Right. No, for sure. So speaking of things and what could happen and what should happen and what might
Mhm.
happen, what did happen. I want to go into, so you've got the quarter, is that a quarter zip?
It's a quarter
The
zip. It sure
Yeah,
is.
yeah, yeah. So you've got the quarter zip Dallas Mavericks, always representing. I love it. Um, so I want to get into Dallas.
Mhm.
And honestly, I don't want to just talk about this season. We'll get to Klay Thompson, but I really
Sure.
want to start with, I guess, last off season, and I guess even before that, during the season a couple years ago. So the Kyrie Irving deal.
Right.
Um, a couple years ago, Dallas was what, they were the 4th seed when they actually made the trade.
Yeah, they
Maybe the
might
3.
yeah, they might have been 5 trying to get to 4, but I
I mean, it was a
can't
while
quite
ago.
remember. It was a while ago. I can't quite
Um,
remember.
but I want to get your take on the initially what you thought, because me personally, I
Mhm.
was I was torn, because at first I was like, okay, so we saw glimpses of Jalen before Jalen Brunson became who Jalen Brunson is. Like,
Right.
it worked. And when Luka was hurt, he really was kind of like just kind of carrying the squad through that playoff run. So
Oh,
we
yeah.
know that someone who's ball dominant, like, it's not just as simple as someone's ball dominant, so it's not going to work with
Mhm.
Luka. But I did kind of have my, Kyrie Irving was also going through a lot of stuff, and his
Sure.
not playing for a multitude of reasons kind of thing. I
Mhm.
was a little bit skeptical, as a fan and as someone who really like watches, covers, follows the team closely. What
Mhm.
was your initial thought on that Kyrie Irving deal before hindsight?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So obviously you have the context of everything going on with Jalen Brunson, and then you kind of look at the Mavericks, and also at that point in time, there was momentum building about or with the narrative around Luka's unhappy. Luka doesn't really have a team and if you go back and watch some of the lineups that Luka has played with in his career, it's wild to think about what he's been able to do, even just going up in some of those Clippers series. I'm not going to go too far back in the past, but it's been clear that he has needed a guy that has a resume, that has leadership skills, and that guy's respect, to be honest. And so when the Kyrie deal happened, when it was even just talked about, like, okay, here are the teams that are real potential landing spots, it was almost like, okay, well, if Dallas is going to do it, they're going to have to give up Dorian Finney-Smith, who at the time was the heart and soul of the team. Still the entire city of Dallas is mourning that loss. And also you're going to have to include Jaden Hardy, who at the time everyone was like, he's not playing, but like we've seen the flashes. So like, are we sure we want to move that plus draft compensation plus salary filler for a guy that we don't know if the fit's there? We don't know if he's going to be happy here. We don't know if he's going to walk in free agency. So many questions. At the same time, when the deal finally went through and Jaden Hardy wasn't in it at the time, didn't seem very significant. It was significant to me. But when Jaden Hardy wasn't included in that deal and it was Spencer Dinwiddie and Dorian Finney-Smith, I was like, okay, the reality is there are lengthy athletic wings that you can go get kind of at that MLE money. It sucked having Dorian leave, especially given his career growth in Dallas and how he had transformed as a player. But for Dallas, it was always like, are you in the conversation for Zach LaVine? Are you in the conversation for Kyle Kuzma? Like, you don't have an opportunity to go out and get a player like Kyrie Irving. So when the deal actually went through, I was like, look, there's so much risk in this, especially like I mentioned with his impending free agency and all of the links between him and the Lakers. So there was so much risk, but it was like, there's pressure with Luka. Luka's quote unquote unhappy. So you've got to start taking swings. You've got to take a bit of a gamble. You lost Jalen Brunson. Like, you can't just sit around waiting for someone like Zach LaVine that maybe you can actually put a competitive package for, but you're never going to land the Bradley Beal. You're never going to land the Damian Lillard, which I'm not saying that those are perfect fits, but that tier of player. So the Kyrie Irving situation presented an opportunity for Dallas to leverage another situation that had gone poorly between Brooklyn and Kyrie and turn that into something that could potentially pay off. And it has, and I think it will continue to. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
been
So
crazy.
it's been wild, and I kind of want to stick. I want to then kind of move to the very next piece of that. So all
Mm-hmm.
of a sudden, how that season ended in particular did not end the way expected. And of course, like you mentioned, Kyrie
Mm-hmm.
Irving had pending free agency. We knew Kyrie
Right.
Irving wanted to get paid. We were all trying to watch, like, is he actually going to be on his best behavior, quote unquote,
Sure.
or is he going to be acting a fool? There was so much going on, and then it was like, okay, you traded, so it was Dinwiddie and Finney Smith who
Right.
left. And for Kyrie, who was probably assumed, like you mentioned, there was a lot of Laker talk, there was a lot of
Yep.
LeBron talk. And it felt like, oh man, there's no way that after just it went, it went to shit
Yep.
that season. But he resigns, which to me, just the even resigning in the first place
Mm-hmm.
said a lot on both fronts. Like it did show that it was
100%.
more than just like we just want to make a splash for the sake of making a splash, that there's actually belief on both sides that
Right.
this is something that can work. And I think part of that is why they were able to have success this past year, because people actually believe this is more than just some mercenary player who's really good to get one season out of and to get
Right.
them going. It almost feels like both sides are a little more invested.
Yeah, for sure.
In your opinion,
Mhm.
it's hard now not to think about it in hindsight because it was
Sure.
a while ago.
Mhm.
But in your opinion, did you expect in the moment, like, did you think Kyrie Irving was going to resign after how that season ended, or were you kind of thinking like, well, he maybe sign and trade, or he's just walking?
I thought he was either going to stay or walk. I didn't think a sign and trade would happen. But I thought he was going to stay because one, I didn't think Dallas would risk, and this might sound silly, but moving on from someone like Dorian Finney-Smith, who he had just extended, like they held him so near and dear to their hearts. He was so close with Luka. But again, that's a trade that Luka has to sign off on. He did sign off on it. So when it happened, you're kind of operating under the assumption that means there's sort of this unspoken, you're going to stick around. But at the same time, nothing's ever for sure. Things change. So for me, it was always like, he's either going to walk or he's going to stay. I always thought he was going to stay because from a leverage perspective, I was like, Kyrie has Dallas by like, from a leverage perspective in contract negotiations, he can get anything that he wants from them. And so when it came out that he took even less than, he didn't take what was fully kind of expected for him to get. And so I felt like there was sort of when the negotiation was going down, I felt like there was sort of, you hinted at it earlier, but mutual good faith from both sides, kind of looking at this long-term partnership. And so when I remember where I was when I got the notification that he was officially going to stay, I was like, thank God, because Dallas would have been screwed if he hadn't. But yeah, it's been really special to kind of see how he's built the relationship with Luka, especially because Luka in a lot of ways, he's like Jokic. And I know that that's such a probably annoying thing to say in terms of just like the Eastern European aspect of it. But like they both are don't really care for the spotlight. They're not going to sit around with the media for too long. And so you need to surround him with guys that are talented, but also aren't going to throw that off. You know what I mean? And so I think someone like Kyrie, the way he's come in, built the relationship with Luka, the mutual respect between him, Jason Kidd, like that little trio. I think it just sort of was this match made in heaven. And so it's been really special to see. I've loved it for Luka, the city of Dallas. It's been exciting to see Kyrie kind of find a home and really be embraced by his teammates, especially because Dallas just went to the finals, but they're still a young team. They still have a lot of young players. And the way those young players just like look at Kyrie is like, it's different. It's very different. So Dallas is very lucky to have him for sure.
So now I want to fast forward to, or not super fast forward, but now this offseason and now Klay Thompson. And I'll tell you one thing, like while we were talking about how a lot of us were like, ooh, like is Kyrie Irving, like, does this fit? Is this going to work? I don't know a single person who has been thinking that about Klay Thompson. Like it almost feels like this is, you want to talk about a match made in heaven. Like this is exactly like what needs to happen. You got Dallas coming off of a conference finals appearance. Or am I tripping? Did I say that right? Yeah.
Finals appearance. Yeah.
Finals appearance. Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're good.
I'm thinking of the year they beat the Suns and then
the Warriors. Yep.
But so they're coming off a finals appearance. And of course, like people are looking and they're like, okay, well, maybe they shouldn't have been there, right? Because everybody still like has this like outlook on Denver, which we can talk about because I personally don't. Actually, I'll save it for later.
Okay.
So you add Klay Thompson. I was
Uh-huh.
looking at the roster. If I don't know, Spencer Dinwiddie's back.
Yep.
Um, uh,
Yeah.
Klay Thompson, just take me through
Mhm.
why it works. Like we
Yeah.
know it works from a simple standpoint of, oh well, he's a spot up shooter. He's going to space the floor.
Mhm.
But like you talked about personalities. You talked about
Yes.
how Luka and Jokic are very similar in like we're not really. They don't value the same kind of popularity and fame that a
Yes.
lot of Americans
That's a
value.
good way to put it.
And Klay Thompson is so like, go with the flow. I'm
Mhm.
cool. Whatever it is what it is. I'm just gonna play, shoot these threes, play hard, and
Yep.
everybody's gonna love me. Just talk to me about your opinion on the Klay Thompson marriage and what you expect going forward this season.
Yeah, so I think you put it best. I think it is a match made in heaven. Obviously, you talk about the spot up shooting, the movement shooting, the volume shooting, the enclosed space, all of those things, sure. But when you look at someone like Derek Lively, who's a foundational piece, and last season, when again looking at Dallas's roster, yeah, they made it to the finals, but throughout the regular season, they're relying on Tim Hardaway Jr. to be their third highest scorer, who if you were watching, apart from game 3 against OKC, completely MIA.
Mhm.
And on top of that, yeah, you have Derek Jones Jr. and PJ in the starting lineup who bring a lot of defensive versatility, but in that Boston series and even sometimes against OKC, you could really see how one-dimensional sometimes the offense could be in terms of just banking on Kyrie and Luka to kind of save the day and then dish it out and have someone like Derek Jones Jr. or PJ Washington knock down that three. And that was not sustainable, especially against Boston. And so not only is Klay Thompson going to obviously thrive in the space, but it's not like you have one heliocentric star that's going to pull all this gravity and then you can just dump it off to Klay, which is not that Steph was a heliocentric offense, because that's not what I'm saying at all, but you kind of have Steph, and then if you're not worried about Steph, you're worried about Klay. But in Dallas, you got Luka, you've got Kyrie playing off of each other. And then, oh yeah, Klay Thompson is still running around the court and somebody has to keep an eye on him. So do you blitz Luka? Do you blitz Kyrie? And if you blitz one of them and send someone at Klay Thompson, well, then you have Derek Lively in the middle of the floor in a 3-on-2 situation with Klay Thompson and PJ Washington in the corner. And what do you do at that point? Because Klay thrived last year with Trace Jackson Davis in the pick and roll, and now he has Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford. And so there's that level of improvement from just a Klay individualistic perspective. I think Derek Lively, who really did well finding the three-point shooters last year, again, was targeting PJ Washington and Derek Jones Jr., and now he's targeting Klay Thompson in that starting lineup when he's looking to kind of dish that out. So I think, again, being able to maximize on the spacing and having someone like Klay also, even if defenders are able to get out there, like a team like Boston, who is incredibly versatile in that area, even if they're able to close out on him, he can still hit those shots in space. And so people talk about last year how he really struggled and, he fell off and he's not the same Klay Thompson, but the dude is out there putting up 18 points a game. I believe it was shooting 10 threes a game, nearly 40% from three. And so it's like, that was last year on a Warriors team that was not the Warriors that we're used to. This Dallas team, again, you've got Kyrie and Luka, and then Derek Lively, who last year was good, but I think this year what people are going to see with Derek Lively is that he's going to be more aggressive as a scorer. And when he does that, just his size and athleticism alone, there's not a whole lot of people that can guard that. You know what I mean? And he's very good about seeing a charge coming and dumping that ball off, which is where Klay Thompson comes in. So from an offensive perspective, I think it's a perfect fit. I think it's going to be impossible to guard. I really do. And I also
So,
think that, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
well, I was just about to say you literally transitioned us right to my next piece,
Yeah.
which was I wanted to see your opinion on the outlook for Lively and Gafford this season,
Mhm.
because it almost felt like it was like they were both almost on this same even. They all brought different stuff, but they
Right.
were maybe Lively's got a little bit more like raw natural athleticism, but they
Yes.
both like, rim protector, rim runner,
Mhm.
throw the alley oop.
Yep.
Um, I'm not quite sure how great they are on a complete switch, but just as
Mhm.
far as like avoiding that, like you can kind of play drop coverage. They give you a little bit of an advantage in drop coverage because it's hard to throw it over them.
Right.
Um, So it just seemed like, okay, we're just gonna ride the hot hand. Whichever one of them is cooking, we're gonna let them play
Yes,
because it's the same. It's kind of the same
it's
role.
kind of the same. Sure.
Do you think that this is the year that like Lively kind of pulls away from Gafford, or do you think that it'll be more of the same this season with those two?
I think this is the year that we'll see it start to change. Jason Kidd has talked about Derek Lively being the starting center, but then he's also said that they're very much battling for that starting spot. But in my opinion, I don't know if that's just a nod, not a nod, but like paying respect to Daniel Gafford because he's been really solid. Almost broke the most consecutive field goals. Almost broke Wilt Chamberlain's record last year, and so he's been phenomenal. But in the playoffs, we really saw Derek Lively as a defender and how he was able to change the impact from a team perspective. Because the thing about Dallas is it's all team defense. Everyone knows that Kyrie and Luka individually, like there are some numbers to back up their defense, but there's still some things missing there. But when you have a group all playing together, and then at the back of that group, your last line of defense is someone like Derek Lively. We saw a massive difference between him and Daniel Gafford and just how he changed the game, specifically in the playoffs. Like you mentioned, during the regular season, it was pretty balanced, and Daniel Gafford was starting. But then in the playoffs, the impact was a lot different, and from the eye test and also from the numbers. And so I think this is the year Derek Lively pulls away. I think him, the relationship that he has with Luka, and also the relationship and chemistry he's already building with Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson found him 3 times, and I think it was 18 minutes when he only played in the first half in that last preseason game. So that relationship is going to build quickly. And then on top of that, they're going to need him to be that last line of defense because, again, talking about the impact that he had in the playoffs, Gafford is good, and he's a great shot blocker, but like you mentioned, the raw athleticism, the wingspan, all of those things, Lively has him beat there. And I talked about having Derek Jones Jr. last year, who was phenomenal, did everything and then some for the Mavericks. But now you don't have him. And at that wing spot, you have Klay Thompson. And Klay has talked about it being very important to prove to people that he is still a very capable defender and that he hasn't taken steps back in that area. But I think most of everyone following the NBA is kind of saying, okay, well, I need to see it, and I need to see it consistently, and I need to see you not get injured doing it. You know what I mean? And so I think having someone like Derek Lively back there, even just as a deterrent in the paint, again, much more so than Gafford, in my opinion, is going to help all of those things. It's going to kind of ease the loss of Derek Jones Jr. I think it's going to allow their team defense to be better, and them to kind of have more, I don't want to say wiggle room or leeway, but there will be more room for any of Kyrie, Luka, or Klay to even kind of like let guys get by them or not take a possession off, but make mistakes because Derek Lively is just that good.
Yeah. Yeah. So I really wish there was a way that Derek Jones Jr.
I
could
know.
have stayed. I would love to see Klay Thompson not have to carry the burden of, hey, like we're playing Paul George tonight. Like I need you. Like, obviously, like Luka and Kyrie aren't doing this. Come on, Klay.
Right.
Like I need you to do this. Like I would love for it to just be like, no, you don't have to guard Paul George. You can guard PJ Tucker in the corner or something
Something like that. Right. Sure. For sure. Yeah.
Know.
I mean, it'll be interesting. I think one thing about Klay, another reason why it is such a match made in heaven is, yeah, he's it's expected that he's like number 3 in Dallas, but I absolutely think that by the end of this year, there could be a real case for Derek Lively being the Mavericks' 3rd best player. And on top of that, Klay Thompson is not making, 3rd star money. He's making PJ Washington money. Even Najee Marshall, Derek Jones, not Najee, that's a bad example. Najee's at $9 million, but he's in that low teens area. And so from a cap structure perspective, especially with Dallas looking at how they had to kind of handle Tim Hardaway Jr., it was like Tim Hardaway Jr. is making near $20 million. He needs to be starting. And then it got to a point where it's like, we cannot start him. Yeah. And that created I don't want to say friction because he was good until kind of that last season, but it created a challenge. Whereas with Klay, as he gets older, whatever happens, Dallas now has a lot of tradable contracts. They can create up to 18, 19 million. I tweeted about it the other day to make a trade this season. what I'm saying is there can come a time where Klay can come off the bench. And if that's what's best for him, if that's what's best for the team, I think Klay would do it. I think they would still be very good doing that. And there's just a lot of optionality there that they've not had in the past. So Klay taking that much money to come to Dallas in the long term, I think is going to be a big, big deal for Dallas to really solidify themselves as a contender.
Last thing on Dallas specifically. I
Mhm.
want to go into Luka. We can't have a Dallas conversation and not discuss Luka.
Mhm.
I personally believe that he's kind of been right on the cusp of winning an MVP. There's
Mhm.
always like a certain, like a couple years ago before the Kyrie trade, I was kind
Mhm.
of like, oh, you know, Luka maybe for MVP. Even last year, like if they could have finished a little higher seated
Maybe.
in the West, then
Mhm.
possibly as well. But one of the things that is always like a thing with him is like, is he in shape to
Right.
come into the season? So there's a lot of talk like he played um playing in the trying to play in the Olympics.
Right.
But it's also then like you get like you run the risk of exhaustion.
Exactly.
From what
Yep.
you've seen, or like, you know, early exhaustion, from what you've seen, just paying attention to everything,
Mhm.
looking at the interviews, watching the practices, the preseason. I know he's not playing
Right.
currently. Do you think what does it look like for him? Is he in that kind of like mode of like I remember when Kawhi Leonard hit that game winning shot, game 7 against the Sixers, and Joel
Mhm.
Embiid is crying. Um, you know, a lot of people were kind of like, okay, like now that you like understand what it feels like to lose
Mhm.
like this and it hurts this bad, like
Mhm.
we expect to see a little bit less trolling and a little more like about your business.
Sure.
Um, and with Luca, now that you've lost in the finals, you got a taste of the finals. You lost in the conference finals before,
Right.
but now you got a taste of the finals. Um, and like, is it now more about like, hey, maybe there's so much hookah in the off season,
Sure.
and maybe there's a little bit more like making sure we're in shape, making sure that we're maturing, not so many technical fouls. Just in your
Mhm.
opinion, where do you think Luca had like? Do you see any improvement in where you think it'll benefit him in the long run for this season? Do you think he's primed for an MVP season? Is there still some stuff that worries you? Just kind of, what's your
Yeah.
overall overview on Luca coming into this year?
Yeah, it's a great question because there are a lot of layers to it. I it's funny because I think we're a couple years away from the technicals actually kind of being reeled in, if ever. I don't think that there's going to be, he always talks about it and he always starts off the season like, okay, but it's just the way the dude is. He loves talking to the fans, he loves talking to the other team. And the second, like, we've all seen it, how he is with the, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so it's just the competitiveness in him, and it doesn't always come off as a viewer. It doesn't always come off very well. I can see that very clearly, but that's his personality, and I don't really see that changing as much as he wants it to. But
It kind of gets him going
it
to an
gets him
extent.
going. Yeah, I mean, you've got people on Mavs Twitter being like, "Okay, asshole Luca's here. Like he's going for
Yeah.
50 now. Like way to go." And so it turns into a thing, but from another fan's perspective, like I can understand how it's hard to watch, and that I get that. And so for Dallas, it's like, okay, yeah, you're unlocking him now. But with Luca, and also kind of going into like the off season, like the hookah stuff, all that stuff, also hard for me to see that changing. Like I don't know that he's sitting around doing nothing. He definitely is out there working. He's doing, intense workouts. He's got his trainer. He's got his nutritionist and the diet. He's doing all of the stuff, but he's still the guy that wants to go back to Slovenia, chill with his friends and family. He's that guy. The same way Jokic is. You know what I mean? Like he wants to go home and unwind. He doesn't. They're not. They love basketball, and it's important for them to be good. But Luka's never gonna. In my opinion, I would love for him to prove me wrong, but he's never gonna come into the season with some Giannis type body transformation. That's not going to happen. And for me, I don't think it needs to. Like, yes, you talk about the exhaustion. That is an issue. But I also think when you add someone like Klay Thompson and even Najee Marshall to an extent, guys that can create their own shot, yes, it was really helpful having someone like Kyrie Irving, but you need a little bit more than that. And so as Luka goes further and further into his career, having more and more guys that can create their own shot and not just have to be catch and shoot guys for him, that's going to also change the exhaustion aspect of it. And again, the team defense as opposed to individual defense. He does take a lot of pride in being a good defender, but again, you only have so much energy. And so I think the team defense, having other guys that can create their own shot. And like I mentioned before, them being able to, between Maxi Kleber, Dwight Powell, and Dante Exum, creating 18 million to go out and get someone like a Bogdan Bogdanovic, a Jordan Clarkson, something like that, to just give you that boost off of the bench. That will continue. All of those things will play into Luka's ability to carry less of the load, have, less save the day type possessions, and even get to a point where maybe, I mean, the West is a gauntlet, but maybe get to a point where you don't have to be playing 40 plus minutes every single night. So I think that that's kind of the goal for Luka, and they're doing everything that they can within their control as a team, from a team perspective, to put him in a position to be successful. And again, like you mentioned, the dude is just lost in the finals, got that taste. He's super competitive. That's really all he cares about. And so I suspect that he will continue to take those things seriously, but will I be surprised if he starts to gas out just from the load? No, I think there's always going to be that concern.
Right. Okay. Well, that was a good 30 minutes on Dallas. And that was kind of exactly how I hoped that would go. That was super insightful. And it's so much better to talk with somebody who has a deeper understanding of stuff beyond just someone who's like myself, who's just kind of a general NBA fan. I don't have a favorite team. I do tend to, if I don't have a favorite team, root for Dallas teams because I'm a Cowboys fan. So I will root for the
tough year.
Yeah, well,
we're hanging in there.
We're still early. But I'll mess around and I live in North Carolina, so I cheer for the Carolina Hurricanes, but then I'll cheer for the Dallas Stars. I'll cheer for the Texas Rangers. But anyway, so Dallas has always interested me because I love Luka as well. A couple of other things before we get you out of here. I wanted to kind of go over some of the general NBA landscape things and a couple of your opinions. First off, Paul George to the 76ers. We were talking about matches made in heaven, and it almost feels like if it's not for the stuff that we know is going to come up, injuries, it would be. Especially, and you just kind of hope that with Tyrese Maxey being who he can be, and his speed, his ability to kind of put up 30 and not require Paul George to ever have to play point guard, maybe his usage rate goes down and maybe he can stay healthy. And that's always what I hope, because I love Paul George as well.
Right.
A couple things I want to hit on that. One, we'll talk about the Sixers' real expectations, but more so the Clippers side of things. They chose to re-sign James Harden. They chose to, and they chose to give Kawhi the extension, and they chose to let Paul George walk over a no trade clause or over years or whatever it was. I was listening to his podcast about it. Your thoughts on the Clippers' decision to say, we're going to roll with Harden and Kawhi, and we're going to let, I can see it on your face, and we're going to let Paul George walk. You run me through it, because I have a feeling that we're on the same page with this.
Yeah, to me, that was malpractice. It was insanity. I couldn't believe it, because you try to and you never know what's going on behind the scenes. I will try to always get as close as I can to understanding what's going on behind the scenes that goes into these decisions. But this will always be one that's a head scratcher for me, because from the Clippers perspective, you're rolling out a new logo, a new jersey, a new stadium, a new everything. And you lose the one guy who's been most available for you. And arguably, I'm not going to discredit Kawhi, but he's been there. He's been locked in. Everything was there. All you had to do was put up the money, which is all we've ever seen them do, is put up the money. That's never, ever been a problem. So why now is this the issue that you decide to be stand your ground on? We're just not going to we're not going to pay him. I'll never, ever, ever understand that. And then especially because it's not even at the point where it's then we'll just trade him. Like the Jimmy Butler situation where it's bad example, because that dude's not leaving Miami. But you look at a situation where somebody wants to be there. All you have to do is just give him the contract. And what's the alternative if you don't? He walks for nothing. Then you're filling in the gaps with, no disrespect, Chris Dunn, Derek Jones Jr.,
That's your guy.
I know, and I love him, but it's not going to be the same in LA. I'm sorry, it's not. It's not going to be the same. And I know people draw the comparisons between James Harden and Luka, sure, but it's not going to be the same. It's just not. And so I think the Clippers, good luck.
Yeah, they go from being the team that everybody always says if they can stay healthy, they should be in the final, to just like, and I don't understand. Maybe you can explain this. I don't understand the fascination. Everybody's fascination with James Harden. I'm so just like over James Harden personally. Like, I'm good on that. I don't need to see James Harden play another dribble of basketball. He's done enough. And like, I don't know why people can't. The problem with fans is that when you look at somebody, you only look at the name. Like when Blake Griffin joined the Celtics, and it was like, oh man, like they're cheating now. And it's like, guys, like this is not.
Have you been watching?
Yeah. Like, what are we doing? Like, I understand, like, you know, James Harden can get out of the 38-8 James Harden and just go to like 20-10 as a point guard and just kind of just like let that ride. That's fine. Is he a move? Is he a needle mover? To me, no. He's definitely not a replacement for Paul George.
I agree with that.
And yeah, they're gonna struggle. I'm glad that you are on the same page, especially like Paul George had a great relationship with the owner. And you know, had a great relationship with Jerry West, who passed away, rest in peace. And maybe that's part of it too. I wonder if Jerry West was still around if Paul George is not.
How that could have changed. Sure.
Right. But
yeah,
I digress. From the Sixers side of things, I applaud them for trying. I applaud them for you know, doing the thing they felt was necessary. But one of the things that I thought was impressive about the Knicks a couple years ago was not falling in the go trade for Donovan Mitchell trap, because we need to do something. And it almost feels like that's what Philly did here. 4-year max with Paul George, injury history. But at least with this one, it makes sense, just like paper. So we can talk about the real expectation for the Sixers, but are you on board with the move? Sign him, Paul George. I mean, it's nice to sign and I have to trade for it. Sign him, Paul George with Embiid. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I thought it was a home run because Paul George, again, yes, the injury history is very relevant. You can't overlook that. And when you roll out or commit long-term money, a lot of long-term money to someone that has injury history like that, it's very difficult, especially when you're a team that really only can go as far. I mean, you can make a case any teams can only go as far when they're healthy, but someone like Joel Embiid, like real questions there. But Philly has been strategizing for this exact scenario. Like, obviously, looking at what they did, you can even point it down to Paul Reed, how they handled the Paul Reed situation. All of it has been indicative of, okay, we're going to let Tobias Harris walk. We're going to do all these things so we can have as much money as possible to completely restructure our roster. And to be able, in my opinion, to be able to go out and negotiate a deal to bring Paul George, to have him leave, because he could have stayed, he could have taken that, but to get him to leave that situation, and then also bring guys like Caleb Martin in, again, away from a team like Miami. You bring back Kelly Oubre, who's solid for them. You bring in, like, you've got all these kind of fringe pieces like the KJ Martin, the Reggie Jackson, guys that can, in my opinion, give you a little bit on a playoff team. I think what they were able to do was huge, and getting someone in that tier is not easy. There's so many things that have to go right for you to even be in a position to get someone like that, like you mentioned, not via trade, for free. And so, not for free, but for nothing in exchange. And so, to me, I thought it was a home run. That's all you can expect for when you have cap space, to be able to pry someone away like that. Will it come to fruition? I don't know. But in terms of a two-way fit, I think this is exactly what they need. I think it was the right move. If you're Philly and you don't land Paul George, then you're kind of looking at the trade market. Do we go for a Brandon Ingram? Do we do this? Do we wait on Donovan Mitchell? You know, and at that point, you're like, I don't know that I like this. And so for me, the fact that they were able to get it done, targeted their guy, were able to get it done, I thought it was phenomenal work.
Yeah, I think I heard something about Klay Thompson as well. At some point. And I'm not sure if Klay Thompson alone, I mean, obviously, like there's not a lot of players out there that are hitting free agency that can bring what a Paul George can bring. Personally, like to me, there's literally not one flaw in his game, not one. Like obviously, like it's hard for him to stay healthy, but he can handle the rock. He can play the point. Like he could legitimately play the point if you wanted him to all season long. He can shoot. He's athletic. He can defend. He can score all three. He's really a 4-level scorer. He'll shoot it from the logo if you give him the opportunity.
Right.
Like I love me some Paul George. I really do. So, and I think that the teams in the East looked at Boston and said, okay, as presently constructed, there's not a single team in this league that, in my opinion, that really was going to compete with Boston.
Yeah, I agree.
In all seriousness, I think that no matter who they played out of the West, they were going to win it at maximum 6. And that team's way too versatile. And you got to have guys who can make tough buckets and get tough buckets and get stops. So you talk about Philly said, oh, we got to do something. We're not going to beat that Boston team the way we're constructed right now with Tobias Harris and whoever else. And that's no disrespect.
Right.
Then you got the Bucks, who kind of have held serve because their whole thing was, look, we had to fire our coach. And if you want me to get into Doc Rivers, we could do that another time.
How much time do you have?
Right, exactly. But they're like, we fired our coach, we traded for Dame. So like I think the Bucks really feel like we just need to run it back. And we like the move we made for this Boston team was made last year. We just finally need to see it.
Right.
But then you have the Knicks. And if you're looking at the Knicks, who first of all, I love that whole Villanova thing they had going.
Right.
And then they said, you know what, Julius Randle, let's go get Cat. Let's go get some size. From a trade perspective from both teams, I don't necessarily see it's almost I don't feel like neither team won, and I also don't feel like either team lost. It just felt like these were both moves that needed to happen. It kind of felt like it was about that time for Randall to be out of there.
Yeah.
And Karl Anthony Towns, as talented as he is, he's also kind of delusional. if you just hear him talk. And you know, it was probably time for a change of scenery as well, where we know it's Jalen Brunson over here, Mikal Bridges over here. So I like the move. I just think that they're, you know, I think that the Knicks were like, we have to bring something. We need to try to do what Kristaps does for Boston, which almost feels like that was the point of the move, and we can match up. Your thoughts?
Sure. Yeah, no, I think it's really funny when you draw the comparisons in the Boston blueprint, where you have the floor spacing big, shot blocking capabilities, but not necessarily
a shot blocker.
Yeah, not like a Rudy Gobert, Wembanyama type shot blocker. Still good. Don't come for me, Boston fans, but like there's a difference. And so I think that it's an interesting comparison, especially when you've got guys like Mikal Bridges that you mentioned, OG Anunoby, Josh Hart, though even Miles McBride, like players like that are just dogs. And so I think that's probably the best type of situation that you could surround Karl Anthony Towns with, because I agree that I think Minnesota was going to continue to run into a problem. However, I think it's still a Rudy Gobert problem. I don't think it's a Karl Anthony Towns problem. But moving Karl Anthony Towns, like, I agree that it was a question that was going to continue to come up. So there's a lot. Minnesota's a whole other conversation, and they should be counting their blessings that they have Naz Reid over there. But for New York, I like the lineup that they're going to be rolling out. I think it's going to be really fun. I think playing with a point guard like Jalen Brunson is going to do wonders for Cat. I think having a floor spacing big who's as talented as Karl Anthony Towns, again, in that tier, is huge for a team like New York, because while I liked them getting Mikal Bridges for them, I don't like how much they paid for it. That's just my opinion. After the season that he just had, I did not think New York was in a position to operate from a point of leverage to get that much for Mikal. And I like Mikal, but that was my opinion on that. And then you have DiVincenzo, who was a perfect fit in New York. Was he going to be the backcourt partner to take them to the promised land? Probably not. But again, a really good system fit that you could rely on, was healthy, all that. And so I'm curious. And now you look at New York, who, again, I love their starting lineup, and it's not that they don't have a bench, but the front court is pretty thin. You know, what happens there? I like what they did in the draft. obviously like Tyler Kolek, but they've still got some things that they need to sort out, in my opinion. And also, I think one of the biggest questions is everything really right in the world between Tibbs and Cat? It all looks
Oh,
great
yeah,
now.
yeah.
It all looks good right now, but let's see what happens when the pressure cooker starts to, that's something that I'm keeping an eye on. So especially with the defense, there's a lot of things that I still have questions with. So I think New York has put themselves from a versatility standpoint in a really good position. I think they're going to be an incredibly fun team to watch, but I don't think it's all perfect. I don't think that it's like done, that this is the finished product is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And Minnesota, like, I just feel like they really just like shrunk the floor with the rain. And like, I don't dislike Julius Randle, and I know
No,
that
I don't
he
either.
can hit you can hit some threes. And I know that he's good for 24 and 10 in the regular season. But it does feel like Julius Randle wants to play bully ball. Bully ball doesn't happen outside the 3-point line. And you just have no space. Like there's none, because obviously Rudy Gobert's not going anywhere. And like you said, this makes Naz Reid the second most valuable player on this team. Like,
I think
legitimate.
Yeah.
So like,
he's very important.
And I don't know. Again, there need to be some changes of scenery, and Randall, from a mentality standpoint, fits Minnesota.
Okay.
But just like as far as style, I'm not necessarily sure I'm in love with it. But again, I'm not the one who makes the big dollars. So
Right.
they got it. They got it. Last thing before I do a quick, there's so much to get into.
I
And
know
we got to
there
wrap
really
it
is.
up. There's so much. Obviously, like, I'm excited for JJ Redick just to see. We know he's a smart basketball mind. Just to see what he does with that Lakers team. I don't think the Lakers team has done enough to be anywhere different than where they were the last couple seasons. But I'm loving, like, I'm all for history. In our lifetime, we've been able to see so much stuff. Like, we've gotten to watch the greatest player of all time, whether you think it's Jordan or LeBron. We've gotten to see both. I mean, Jordan at the end, but we've gotten to see both. We've seen all these records broken by LeBron, that Olympic team. Like, we've seen so much stuff. Simone Biles, like, some of the greatest of all times at all sports we've seen in our lifetime. Phelps, Simone Biles, just Serena Williams, Tiger Woods, like, all of it. And now we get to see a father and son play basketball together. Like, professional basketball together. And it's something that was always kind of flirted around, but like, it's actually there. Just from what do you take away from, because there's been a lot of like, well, they wouldn't have drafted Bronny if it wasn't for the whatever. What is your overall takeaway from the Lakers, their offseason, their coach, Bronny James? Do you think he can actually contribute, or do you think it's going to take a few years before he can really contribute? Where are you at with that?
Yeah, I think so. I loved the JJ Redick hire, even though kind of a very controversial. You were either really for it or really against it. At least that's what I saw. I like it. I think what you said, he's a great basketball mind, and he's also someone that is going to force them to play differently than what they've been doing recently. And while they haven't made significant roster upgrades, I do think that even just bringing in JJ and how he's going to have them play will and utilize certain players. Like, you look at someone like D'Angelo Russell, who, again, a player that you're either a D'Lo guy or you think he's trash. I think having JJ Redick, D'Lo, I think JJ Redick is going to do a lot for him, and so I'm curious to see what that all looks like between Dalton Connect and Austin Reeves. I'm going to be interested to see how he uses them as movement shooters, as opposed to last year with just how their offense ran. There was like a lack of fluidity last year that I was like, God, that I think is going to be different with JJ Redick. And so I'm still watching LA for what they decide to do in terms of player acquisitions. It just got mentioned that they were looking at adding a big. I think that that's a great idea, but I also think that they could use kind of another starter caliber player. And they're in a position where they've got some picks, not a lot, but they've got some picks, and they've also got a lot of movable salary. Still kind of some questions up in the air about how valuable that Jared Vanderbilt contract really is. But you look at the Roy Hachimura contract, which I don't think they're going to be in a hurry to move, but someone like Gabe Vincent, who I think they would be more willing to move. And so LA has opportunities to go out and get something done. I'm curious to see, players like Zach LaVine, players like Jeremy Grant, Kyle Kuzma, that kind of tier who kind of presents themselves as real attainable options for LA, because again, I don't think this team is a finished product, but I think that they're in a better position last year. I think they're all a little bit more locked in. I think there's maybe more respect. As far as Bronny, I don't think, the hate he gets is deserved. I think that that's ridiculous, but in fandom culture, you've got some extremists out there, more oftentimes for worse, in my opinion, than for better. But I think, you just got to kind of wait and enjoy it from a fan perspective. Like you said, you get to see a father and son play together. When are we ever going to see that again? And if your answer is Jason Tatum and Deuce, no comment. But I think for the Lakers this year, there's going to be a lot to watch. There's going to be a lot to enjoy. And again, how JJ uses that team, I don't think is necessarily going to be. I think he's going to put players in a different position to be able to succeed, to kind of help bring out the best of their skill sets, and more specifically D'Lo, Austin Reeves, and Rui Hachimura. And so that's what I'm looking at from LA, and I'm curious to see what they do. And then the last thing that I'll say on the Lakers is, when you talk about relationships, agents, the power of front offices, all of those things, what we saw on draft night with not a single team even, I'm sure they considered taking Bronny James, but how you just kept seeing him fall. And everyone, it was like, nobody's going to take him because everyone knows Rich Paul is saying, don't do it. That shows you how much value some of these relationships, agents, like all of these things going on behind the scenes, you cannot overlook that value ever, because that same value with the Bronny situation is present within trade negotiations, free agency negotiations, players attached to certain agents, players attached to certain teams, coach history, all of those things. You can never overlook them. And again, those are things that are very relevant when you've got Rich Paul in LA, and LA's desperate need for an upgrade with talent. So all things to consider this year and moving forward with LA for sure.
Quick draw. What is your opinion on Denver? Real quick, do you think? I personally don't think. I think that Denver is in the same situation Milwaukee was right after winning that championship.
Oh yeah. Okay.
All of a sudden, Milwaukee hasn't made it past the second round since winning that, and now I feel like Denver just lost to Minnesota in the second round.
Yep.
I don't think Denver's really getting any better. Just gave Jamal Murray an extension. Michael Porter Jr. gets paid a lot of money to stand in the corner. And they brought in Russ, which, but you lost, when you have to start paying and losing guys, losing Bruce Brown and losing Caldwell Pope. Like, people keep putting Denver it's almost like we just want to just put them there.
Right.
I'm not sure if Denver's in the top 4 in the West for me. Yeah.
I think it's interesting. They do keep getting younger, because like you mentioned, they keep losing guys and are drafting guys. But I'm lower on Denver this year. I'm kind of with you. I don't know quite how low I am on them. I actually think Russ is going to be really interesting in Denver. I think that he's going to be better in Denver than he was in LA. I do believe that, in both LAs, obviously. But, and I think Julian Strawther is set to kind of take a next step up. I think Dario Saric is another kind of playmaking hub style big that's going to fit really well in Denver. At the same time, to me, you mentioned Michael Porter Jr., who had a really good year last year. Like, he did everything that they have asked him to do. He was a better rebounder, a better shooter, better scorer. But again, there's still health concerns with him. Always. You can't overlook that. With Jamal Murray, the health, like, you got to hope you put all that money up. So you better hope that he stays healthy, because like you mentioned, you lost those guys. But if all of a sudden Jamal Murray's not even available, what are you doing at that point? You starting Russ? What are you doing at that point? And so I think Denver, again, another roster that is not a finished product. I like some of their depth pieces, but I just think that starting lineup, you've got Jamal Murray, you've got Aaron Gordon, you've got Michael Porter Jr., you've got Jokic. So you have a nucleus, but it's the depth. It's, the roster versatility, where I think it could get a little bit difficult for them, and they're going to have to figure out some moves to make, because if you're not utilizing that trade market, I don't think they're going to be in a position to get a vet on the buyout market the way they have been in the past, the way they've been able to just sign guys for nothing because everyone expected, like you said, expected them to be at the top. They're not in that position anymore. So I think that they're going to potentially find themselves in a bit of a difficult situation when it comes to trying to get deals done, because you look at their tradable contracts, they're longer term deals. They're not short term. So, and not like 4 years, they're more like 2-3 years, which those aren't always that easy to trade. And then you've got the Michael Porter Jr., like you mentioned, a lot of money. And so then that kind of narrows down your realistic options there in terms of actually making a move. And at that point, is it then even worth it trading him if you're going to move him for someone like Brandon Ingram or Zach LaVine? Again, the names that are currently out there. Obviously, it always changes. Those are the names that are currently out there. And I don't think Denver would do that. That makes no sense, in my opinion. So again, a lot of different angles, challenges that they're going to face, individual storylines that I think are going to be interesting and have potential for excitement, but and optimism even. But as a team, they're going to need Jamal Murray and Jokic to be healthy and playing out of their minds, and that's a big ask.
Yeah. 3-part question. You don't have to give us the why.
Okay.
Just tell us what it is.
Okay.
I need your Eastern Conference champion this year. Your Western Conference champion this year, and your NBA champion this year. I think I know exactly what all 3 of these answers are going to be.
Okay.
Because I don't know, because I don't know if you're gonna do it at a fandom or if you're gonna do it at a whatever. So
yeah,
Eastern Conference champion, Western Conference champion, NBA champion.
My East, I hope I'm wrong, but I have to go with Boston. My West, I'm going to go with OKC, because as much as I'm there with Dallas, I do think that OKC is more. I think Jalen Williams is going to take a significant step forward. I think the Isaiah Hartenstein signing was huge. I'm really concerned about Chet's shot. Like, I'm not going to, but I do think I know you literally just said we don't need the why. I think it's going to be okay.
Fine. No, you can.
I think it's going to be okay.
Just don't feel the pressure of having to explain it all.
I think it'll be OKC. I think Dallas. I will say I do think people are significantly undervaluing the additions that Dallas made. I think they're really just looking at Klay's not who Klay was. I'm just going to say it real quick. You add Klay Thompson, but you also add Najee Marshall and Quentin Grimes. Jaden Hardy's taking steps forward. You bring in your third ball handler and Spencer Dinwiddie. Dallas made significant upgrades. So, and Derek Lively's about to take a step forward too. So I'm very high on Dallas, but Dallas has more questions with health than I think OKC does. And I think OKC has more, I think Dallas has more top tier talent, in my opinion. When you look at Luka, Kyrie, then you look at Shea and Jalen Williams and Chet, all those guys, I think Dallas has more top tier talent, but I do think that OKC is at that right blend of youth and health and durability. And then I like how they play on both sides of the ball. So I think there's more questions with Dallas on all of those things than there are with OKC. So from a most likely perspective, I'll give it to OKC.
For the championship.
Oh, no. Sorry. No,
okay,
the championship.
Okay.
I don't even want to say it. I think it's going to be Boston. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope somebody in the East just tears through the playoffs and takes them down. That would be wild. That would be wild.
We didn't even get to talk about the Warriors. We didn't get to talk about the Suns. We didn't get to really get into the Timberwolves or the Celtics. We didn't talk about the Pacers. You brought up Oklahoma City, which just completely was like, oh crap. We didn't say a word about any of them. There's so much to tackle. We didn't talk about the Raptors, who have decided who their core is.
Oh yeah.
This wasn't supposed to last this long, and we probably could have taken this another 35 minutes. So we definitely need to do this again. But
absolutely.
Let everybody know where they can find all of your stuff, all of your work, if they're just kind of sifting through the internet, where they can find you on Twitter, on Instagram, just like you put new content out, whatever that new content is, where they can find it.
Yeah, well, first, again, thanks for having me. I do love talking about all this stuff, especially the storyline, player acquisition, like evaluate all that stuff. I love that stuff. But you can follow me on Twitter at the Lauren Gunn. That's Gunn with 2 N's. And yeah, as far as my Bleacher Report stuff, those sometimes I'll tweet out, like if I've got an upcoming show coming up on there, I'll typically be doing them with S, and we'll be talking about, again, what's going on in latest in the NBA. And then I'll be, again, kind of come September, November, or not September, but more so like November, December, when those trade restrictions start lifting, rotations are kind of being set. If you want to know what players are available, what players are likely to be on that trade market, could be on your team next, come follow me and I'll be breaking that all down.
Lauren Gunn, ladies and gentlemen. Lauren, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah.
We're gonna stay in touch. We're not gonna go another 2.5, 3 years
right.
at all. And if you hadn't picked it up at this point, apparently go pay attention to Najee Marshall this year, guys. She has said his name about 17 times today.
I'm telling you.
So go look it up. Thank you again. Lauren, until next time.
Until next time.